Following a developing story out of Newcastle County where the remains of a child have been found. They were discovered Friday afternoon in the area of Little Lass Fields on Duck Creek Parkway in Smyrna.
Welcome or welcome back, and thanks for being here. I'm Cassie, and this is A Wicked World. If you haven't heard yet, I'm now offering YouTube channel memberships where you can get early access on all my new videos or up to 3 exclusive videos each month, depending on which tier you sign up for. So if that's something you're interested in, make sure you check it out now. The story I have for you today is about a little girl who no one realized was missing for over a year. And by that time, it was already much too late for her. This is the story of Emma Cole. Emma Grace Cole was born on January 10, 2016 at Indiana University Health Bloomington Hospital to her mother, Christy Cole, and her father, Joshua Dothit. She was a sweet and happy little girl who loved being outside, playing at the park, and swimming. She also loved singing, chicken nuggets, French fries, the show Paw Patrol, and her cat, Kit Kat. At the time of her birth, Emma's father, Joshua, was behind bars, and there were also questions about his paternity. According to Joshua's sister, Tanya Axum, when Christy told Joshua that she was pregnant, he didn't believe her. It wasn't until Emma was about 6 months old that he began to finally acknowledge the little girl was his. Now, Christy had struggled with addiction for much of her life, and while it's not known if she used while she was pregnant with Emma, by the time the little girl was born, she was clean. Before Christy left the hospital following Emma's birth, she indicated that she did not want to keep her. So Emma's aunt Tanya would take her home instead. From then on, Tanya and Christy would take turns caring for the infant until Tanya decided to take her full-time in April of 2016. This was around the same time that Christy relapsed again. Emma's other 3 siblings, who had a different father than her, remained in their mother's care. By July, Christy's father, James Cole, convinced her to enter a drug rehab program in Florida. And even though she resisted at first, Christy would ultimately agree, and she handed over custody of the other 3 children to their biological father. Tanya, who was still caring for Emma full-time, filed an official court petition to gain guardianship of the little girl. Shortly after, a Monroe County, Indiana judge temporarily appointed her as Emma's guardian. Within weeks of Christy being admitted to her drug rehab program, she would leave and go back to Indiana, not completing it. By the end of September that year, Emma's aunt Tanya was granted full guardianship of Emma, and Christy did not object to it. According to Tanya, the mother had only seen her daughter once since she had returned from Florida in mid-August. Christy entered yet another Florida drug rehab program in October of 2016. And then, once again, a few months later in January of 2017. It was sometime between these 2 stays that she met a man from Delaware named Brandon Haas. He was also in recovery, and the 2 lived in the same sober community for men and women. When Christy was discharged from the program on February 10th, she decided to move to Delaware with Brandon, despite having no connections there other than him. Shortly after, the couple made a trip to Bloomington, Indiana, to visit with Christy's family. While there, they briefly went to Tanya's house to see Emma. According to Tanya, this was the first time that the mother had seen her daughter since August of 2016. It had been an entire 7 months. She even missed Emma's first birthday. Then, in May of 2017, after only months of knowing and dating one another, Christy and Brandon decided to get married. They were living together at a home located in Pike Creek, Delaware, which was close by to where Brandon's mother, brother, and sister-in-law resided. Just weeks after tying the knot, Christy reached out to Tanya and told her that she wanted custody back of Emma. Tanya was shocked and, of course, appalled by the idea, so she decided to cut off communication with Christy completely, hoping that she would just go away. This, however, also ended the FaceTime calls that Christy had recently been having with her daughter. Less than a month later, an attorney from Christy's mother's law firm, who'd represented Christy in all prior paternity and guardianship matters, filed a petition to terminate Tanya's guardianship of Emma. Even though Christy had clearly not cared one bit about her daughter up until recently. Tanya would, of course, fight back, and there was a hearing in August of 2017, during which time her attorney would tell the judge that Christy had not seen her daughter since a visit in February. After that, Christy had actually returned to Indiana 3 to 5 times, and not once had she seen Emma. Additionally, when Christy's mother, Belinda, brought her other 3 children for a trip to Delaware in July, she had not asked for Emma to be included. Belinda would later say that she would have loved to have invited Emma along, but there just wasn't enough room in the car. At this hearing, Tanya's guardianship of Emma was extended until another court hearing could take place in late September. Following this court appointment, Christy would visit briefly with Emma at a local McDonald's. But Tanya said this was only after she had chased Christy out of the courthouse, asking her if she wanted to spend any time with her daughter. So if you ask me, Christy was already making it pretty clear that the only reason why she wanted Emma back was so that she could receive state benefits for her each month. When the September hearing came around, the judge decided that it was best to terminate Tanya's guardianship of Emma and return her back to her mother. Christy was given custody of the little girl that very day, and she returned back to Delaware with her mother just a few days later. Now, Emma's biological father, Joshua, said that he wanted no involvement in the court proceedings. This was even though his sister Tanya had tried to reason with him, letting him know that there was no way that Christy was ready to have her daughter back yet. At this time, Christy didn't have custody of her other 3 children either. And her court-appointed child advocate believed that it was a positive sign that she was only trying to get one child back at a time. She said that she was doing the right thing by trying to build a relationship with Emma first before regaining custody of her other kids. Just months later, in December of 2017, Christy was given back immediate and permanent custody of her other 3 children. This came after an emergency motion was filed by Christy's attorney because their father, Christopher, had been involved in a DV incident with another family member. Then in July of 2018, Christy, Brandon, and her 4 children, including Emma, moved from Pike Creek to Smyrna, Delaware. Tanya was still allowed to have periodic video calls with Emma and Christy. When she FaceTimed the mother and daughter on May 29, 2019, she noticed that Emma looked rather thin, and her round cheeks were sunken in. Little did Tanya know this would be the last time that she would ever see her niece. On September 13, 2019, a dog walker was out walking near the Little Lass softball complex, which was just across from Smyrna Middle School, when she came across the burnt skeletal remains of a small child. She immediately contacted police.
Police were on the scene again today. You can see crime scene tape around the field and tents covering the area where the remains were discovered. It's believed the victim was under 10 years of age. Detectives are getting help with the investigation from the Attorney General's office and the State Fire Marshal's office as well. The news of the child's body being found here has left parents rattled and wanting answers.
It's unbelievable, really. I mean, around this area, I feel like everybody kind of knows everybody. It's a smaller community. It just doesn't seem right.
It would be determined that the body had been there for at least a few weeks, if not more. And at first, authorities were not able to identify the child. They did, however, determine that the skeleton belonged to a little girl who was of Caucasian or Hispanic descent. She was between the ages of 2 and 5 years old and had slightly wavy brown hair. A sketch was made of what detectives believed the child might have looked like when she was alive. These drawings were then posted at gas stations, on telephone poles, and in libraries across Delaware. Police hoped that someone would recognize the girl and have more information as to what had happened to her. But no one came forward. Soon, detectives began calling the child Baby L. The only clue that authorities had at this point was a surveillance video that was taken at Smyrna Middle School. It showed a mid-sized passenger car entering the area at 12:15 in the morning, one day earlier that month. A person was then seen getting out of the car, and they exited the field around 1:37 in the morning. Now, James Cole had not heard from his daughter Christy in over a year. He'd reached out weekly for a while, then every few weeks, but his calls would always go to voicemail, and she wouldn't answer his texts either. While James was a little concerned, he wasn't surprised because his relationship with Christy had always been rather rocky. James had also not seen Christy's youngest child, Emma, since the time she was born in January of 2016. Then on September 10th, 2020, James's other daughter, Kelsey, Christy's sister, told him that she had had a strange conversation with her mother, Belinda, and then another weird conversation with Christy. It was about Emma. Kelsey informed James that Emma was no longer living with her mother in Delaware, but she wasn't sure why. Kelsey's mother, Belinda, had been told that Christy was having problems with Emma and the two were not getting along. So, she had been sent to live with a friend. Christy also told Belinda at one point that the little girl had the devil in her eyes. However, Christy would advise her sister Kelsey that Emma had been diagnosed as schizophrenic, and she was being held at the Children's Hospital of Philadelphia. This didn't make any sense to Kelsey or James, since Emma wasn't even 5 yet. And most people get diagnosed with schizophrenia when they're in their late teens to early adulthood. Belinda had also told Kelsey that when she had visited Christy around Thanksgiving of 2019, 2 months after the little girl's body was discovered, Emma wasn't there. But Christy had some sort of explanation for her absence, and weirdly, Belinda believed her. Due to all these inconsistencies, Emma's grandfather James began wondering if something more sinister had happened to his granddaughter. So he began scrolling through websites of Delaware funeral homes in the off chance that he would see her picture. While doing this, James came across a photo that would make his heart drop. He discovered the picture of baby L, and both he and his wife agreed that it must be Emma. Since it was already so late at night, James decided to call the police the very next morning. When he spoke with a detective, he told them that he was fearful that baby L was actually his granddaughter, Emma Grace Cole. He also informed them that while he hadn't spoken to his daughter Christy in over a year, he had done an online search for her. And he found that she and her husband Brandon had been evicted from their Smyrna home in December of 2019. Additionally, James knew that the couple's former home was less than 2 blocks away from the police station, and not even a mile away from the softball field where the child's body was discovered. So had it been Christy who had done this, she would have had to pass directly by the police station to dispose of her daughter's body. Less than 2 weeks after Emma's grandfather James called the tip line to report his suspicions, the FBI, who were now involved in the case, set up surveillance outside the Comfort Inn and Suites in Glen Mills, Pennsylvania, where they'd recently learned that Christy and Brandon were staying. As investigators were staking out the hotel, they saw Christy leave with one of her sons, and on her way out, she disposed of a few things in the hotel's dumpster. Once she was gone, law enforcement grabbed these items and sent them over to the medical examiner's office. They would attempt to match any DNA found in the trash belonging to Christy with the little girl's remains. 4 days later, those results would come back, and it was determined that Christy's matched the unidentified child. It was confirmed that the remains belonged to 3-year-old Emma Grace Cole. Due to how long Emma had been dead and the fact that her body had been burned, her cause of death is unknown. However, it was ruled as a homicide. Emma's mother, Christy, and her husband, Brandon Haas, were then placed under arrest in Pennsylvania, and they were charged with CA. Upon being extradited back to Delaware, they were additionally charged with endangering the welfare of a child and tampering with evidence. Christy also faced charges of abusing a corpse and recklessly burning. and was later charged with murder by abuse or neglect.
I think today we need to hold our children and our grandchildren extra tight, because there are those who never had a chance. And Emma never had a chance, given the abuse that she endured over a very long period of time. This young child we have to remember in our hearts. And so when you go home tonight, just hug your kids and hug your grandkids if you're as old as me.
At the same time as her arrest, Pennsylvania's Child Welfare Services took custody of Christy's other 3 children. Soon after, her mother, Belinda, was granted custody of them. When Christy and Brandon were brought in for police interrogation, Brandon was immediately ready to tell them what had happened to Emma. Christy, on the other hand, spent 4 hours lying to investigators. She said that Emma was in a facility in Virginia receiving care for her mental health problems. Again, if she was actually still alive, she wouldn't even be 5 yet. Regardless, Christy proceeded to invent a complex fiction about Emma's progress at the facility. And she claimed that she visited her there a number of times too. It wasn't until detectives confronted the mother with her lies that she finally told them that sometime in July of 2019, she'd woken up and found Emma dead in the bedroom that she shared with her brother. Christy said that she then ran to the bathroom holding the toddler and put her under the shower in an attempt to revive her. In that moment, she said that Emma was, quote, so beautiful and the happiest that she had ever seen her. Christy said that it looked like she was just out of her misery. She also attempted to blame her husband Brandon for the girl's death. This was despite the fact that he was not home on the night that she said that Emma died, or the following morning. Christy claimed that when she had told Brandon that Emma was dead, he freaked out and wanted to call emergency services, but Christy told him not to. She then put Emma in her van and in her car seat, and vainly hoped that she would wake up during a drive. When she didn't, Christy took the little girl's lifeless body to a place she called Somewhere Beautiful. And while the mother was disposing of her daughter's remains, Brandon took the other 3 children out for a drive. According to Brandon, his wife refused to tell him where she had placed Emma's body. After returning that day, she would only say that the little girl was in peace and in heaven. Meanwhile, Christy said that she continued to visit Emma's body at the softball field daily for about a week after. At some point, she decided to set Emma's body ablaze. According to Christy, this was a symbolic measure to set her daughter free. She claimed that the reason why she didn't bury Emma was because she wasn't somebody's trash. But the reality was that Christy had treated her daughter just like trash. She had starved and beaten her until she ultimately passed away. Emma's 3 siblings had all been found to be suffering from dental decay and malnutrition, the latter of which they believed had something to do with Emma's death as well. These siblings spoke with a therapist and would talk about some of the things that Emma had endured while she was alive. All of the children in the household had been subjected to chores that were inappropriate for their ages. And when they misbehaved, they said that Brandon would put hot sauce under their tongues. But Emma's siblings told the therapist that she was the one who had suffered the most. They said that Christy had forced their 3-year-old sister to run in place while holding weights that were too heavy for her to carry. She was also forced to pull a weighted sled down the basement stairs and do wall sits. Emma would be smacked when she stopped performing these exercises because she was clearly too young to be doing them in the first place. She would be hit with a variety of objects, including a spatula, a belt buckle, a flip-flop, and her mother's coin purse. Emma would also be hit if she was being bad, which included her screaming, crying, soiling herself, or, quote, stealing food. Though I'm not sure how a child can steal food in their own house. Emma's siblings were spanked too, usually with a belt that would sometimes leave a mark. One child said that this was done by both their mother and Brandon. This child then went into further detail and stated that one time after she had gone to the doctors and gotten a few vaccinations, she cried. This resulted in Brandon spanking her with a piece of wood. Another one of Emma's siblings would tell the interviewer that the little girl had bruises on her face, stomach, and legs. He stated she had bruises everywhere. Despite all 4 children being subjected to Christy and Brandon's abuse, prosecutors believed that Emma was the one who was singled out and maliciously tortured. This was something that her siblings noted too, with one telling the doctor that she was confused as to why her mother would do this to Emma and not to the other kids. She also said that she never remembered Emma being called to dinner and that her mother starved her. Occasionally, Christy would give Emma a little bit of rice or a tiny bit of oatmeal, but that was all. Emma's sister said that she had tried to help Emma by hiding food and later taking it to her. She would also care for her at night, because according to her, sometimes Emma was not breathing, and she needed to stay by her side to keep Emma warm. Once the little girl died, her siblings were instructed to not mention their sister. Whenever they tried asking their mother about Emma, Christy would shake and begin to look scared. Then she would tell them to not talk about it. All 3 children informed authorities that their mother was the one who was responsible for Emma's death. One of them said that the day before his sister disappeared, he had seen Christy throwing out Emma's clothes and saying, "That's it for Emma. Emma's not coming back." In a phone call from jail to his brother, Brandon Haas would tell him that he should, quote, attribute Emma's death to getting her ass beat. Emma's Aunt Tanya, who had raised her for the first year and a half of her life, said that she'd become worried about the little girl after Christy stopped communicating in late May of 2019. Tanya had also previously contacted Delaware Child Protective Services, but since they didn't have an address for Christy and her family, she was told that there was little the agency could do. Tanya said that she didn't have any hard evidence of Emma being mistreated either, just screenshots that she had taken during a FaceTime with the little girl. These pictures showed Emma with a bruised face and, later, with scabs on her forehead. Apparently, a neighbor of the families had additionally contacted Child Protective Services back in July of 2018. They said that they had seen 3 of Christy's 4 children outside of a home that she and Brandon were renting in Newark. The children were unattended, and one was naked while another was in just their underwear. The neighbor complained that there was a strong smell of marijuana that was constantly coming from the home, and they were always blaring loud music too. She said that she felt the children were too small for their ages, and also recounted a situation where one child was dropped off after school and there was no parent home for them. The neighbor who knew the Haas's landlord said that the couple had been 6 months behind on their rent. And after they'd been kicked out and an inspection was done on their home, it was discovered that there were holes punched into many of the walls and the entire place reeked like urine. All 4 of Christy's children had been living in one bedroom of the home, while another bedroom was being used just for storage. Yet by the time Delaware Division of Family and Child Services made a visit out to the home about a month later, Brandon and Christy had already been evicted and they moved to Smyrna. The caseworker then didn't find the family for almost 4 months. In October of 2018, it was noted that the medical records for all 4 children had been obtained by a social worker. And there were no concerns other than one no-show at a doctor's appointment for Emma. But after this point, Emma had no further medical visits because her mother and stepfather were beating her and trying to hide it. Emma's 2 sisters who attended school that fall would have numerous attendance issues. This resulted in district staff conducting a home visit in December of 2018. It's unclear what resulted from this visit, but in January of 2019, just a month later, Christy was allowed to homeschool her children. Now, Brandon's mother, who had always been very engaged in the children's care, slowly began to lose contact with them, starting in January of 2019. She noticed around that time that Emma had started to appear thinner, and she even told Brandon and Christy that she would take in the little girl and care for her herself. But the couple declined this offer, and later on, due to a disagreement between Brandon's mother and them, Emma and the other 3 children were then kept from her completely. Christy and Brandon's trial was originally scheduled to start in July of 2023. However, in May of that year, Christy entered into a plea deal. The prosecution and defense asked that she be given 30 years behind bars, followed by a 20-year suspended sentence. Christy had originally been facing life in prison, so this somewhat lax sentence recommendation shocked and angered Emma's family. They said that they weren't even informed that Christy had been given a plea deal until after she had accepted it. Also in May, it was revealed that Brandon Haas had been given a plea deal too. Prosecutors recommended giving him a sentence of just probation, and the maximum sentence he was facing was 8 years. Originally, Brandon was facing up to 44 years behind bars had he gone to trial. Brandon had agreed to this plea deal back in February of 2023 in exchange for testifying against Christy. But this information was not publicly revealed since Christy had written a letter to Brandon asking him to take out life insurance on her because she was thinking about ending her life. So prosecutors feared that she might follow through on these threats if she knew about Brandon's plea deal. Of course, Emma's family was equally outraged at the fact that he was offered a plea. In September of 2023, Christy Haas was sentenced to 30 years in prison for her daughter's murder. She will be eligible for parole in July of 2047. Christy stated at her sentencing, "I'm sorry for all the hurt that I inflicted and the pain that I caused. I knew everything was wrong, and I was so messed up because of everything I did. I thought I could get away with it, to be honest." The mother blamed her actions on her drug addiction, stating, "I wasn't okay then. I'm trying my best to be better than I was." Not once did Christy mention her daughter by name. And she was now even trying to blame Brandon for not calling to get the little girl help, even though she had previously told authorities that it was her that insisted they not call emergency services. Christy's defense attorney said that the true monster was addiction, not her. That same day, Brandon Haas was also sentenced for endangering the welfare of Emma and her siblings. He was ordered to spend 4 years and 1 month in prison. At his sentencing, Brandon tearfully apologized for not going to police sooner when Christy told him that something was wrong with Emma that day in July. He stated that Christy told him that he would be blamed for Emma's death. He also maintained that he did not know what had happened between Christy and Emma before the girl died. Emma's father, Josh, would speak in court, and he said, "I will never comprehend why Emma Grace had to lose her life. I don't know what this beautiful little baby could have done to deserve it." Joshua also said that he felt like he was complicit in his daughter's death. He said, "I was a terrible father, lost, selfish, but I was rebuilding my life and working hard. The realization of that hurts to this very second." The little last softball field where Emma's remains were found was dedicated to her and renamed the Emma Grace Memorial Field in November of 2020. Emma Grace Cole's funeral was held on March 31st, 2021, after her remains were returned to Bloomington, Indiana. She was then buried at Clear Creek Cemetery. Well, thank you for listening to Emma's story today. It just upsets me so much when a family member wants to take a child and give them a better life, but their parent refuses and instead decides to torture and murder them. It's so sad that this is what had to happen to little Emma. And had Christy not been such a selfish monster, this little girl would likely be alive today. How do you feel about this case? If you like true crime and you want to hear it from me, then don't forget to hit that subscribe button below. And turn on your notifications too, so you'll know when I upload a new video, which is at least 2 times every single week. Thanks for watching A Wicked World today. Until next time, take care. Bye. Thank you to all the patrons of A Wicked World. Now, there's even more of A Wicked World on Patreon, so check it out on patreon.com/awickedworld, or use the Patreon app. You'll have access to exclusive videos each month and more. Any support truly helps to make sure the victims are never forgotten, and to highlight the shortcomings of society associated with each case. Do you have a suggestion for a story you'd like to see me cover? If so, send me an email to awickedworldtruecrime@gmail.com.